and welcome to Real Economy. In this episode, we look at the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the labor market. The International Labour Organization foresees the loss of 12 million full-time jobs in Europe in 2020. The sectors most affected include accommodation and food services, manufacturing, retail, and administration. We visit Italy, the country hardest hit by the crisis, and we interview the European Employment Commissioner Nicolas Schmit to ask how far Europe can go to support its workers. But first, a quick look at the new EU financial instrument called SURE, a part of the huge €540 billion package to support companies and workers.
SURE stands for Support to Mitigate Unemployment Risks in an Emergency. There's up to €100 billion available, supported by €25 billion in guarantees from EU members. So how does this work? States can apply for the cash after they've activated schemes to help those in work or the self-employed who lose income. This leads to a rise of expenditure. The assistance comes in the form of a loan on favourable terms.
So we set out to see what the reality is like in Lombardy, in northern Italy, where the deadly coronavirus crisis has devastated the economy. Here's what we found.
To help the countries most affected by the coronavirus crisis, such as Italy, Brussels has announced the creation of a €100 billion fund to preserve jobs and work affected by the lockdown. Like Gemma's job, she lives in Brescia near Milan. She's on a reduced working hours scheme, so she only works a few hours a week. This month, she'll receive 80% of her salary.
My husband also works in the company, so the two salaries will obviously drop. If it is a matter of a month, we'll deal with it. If it's two, we'll clench our teeth. If it is longer, we will obviously have to make a new plan. The company where I work is in good shape. My fear is that they will be forced to do a staff reduction.
Gemma works in this textile factory, a family-run company which has almost stopped production. Filippo, her employer, has lost 35% of annual turnover. In order not to lose any more, he's ready to gradually put his employees back to work. Definitely we'll have to find the tools so that people can be retained, but we can't immediately start working from the first moment we open the company. Reduced working hours schemes were created for moments of normal crisis. I think that the tools that have to be adopted by the state on one side and the European community on the other must also be exceptional. Almost half of Italian workers are experiencing a loss of income. Since the beginning of the crisis, the government has allocated €8 billion to about 7 million workers and another 4 million to the self-employed. But Giovanni, a self-employed taxi driver, is still waiting. He no longer has enough customers to pay his mortgage. He should get €600 from the government for March and €800 for April. Really, the figure's too small, and I hope the EU can give us a hand to be able to face the expenses that we have. Italy's the second most indebted country in Europe, and the International Monetary Fund forecasts that its GDP will drop by 9.1% this year. Without appropriate assistance, the workers most affected by this crisis are at risk of experiencing great hardship. And the head of the European Trade Union Confederation, Lucas Vicentini, warns that this recession can deeply damage European economy and jobs unless the EU takes really generous steps.
We think that the recovery plan should imply at least a double amount of money for the European budget, not only 1% of the GDP of the European Union, but 2%. So we need additional €1 trillion available. And the only way to finance all this, to make sure that it's financing real fresh money, is to have some kind of European bonds in place.
Back to Brussels to speak to European Commissioner for Employment Nicolas Schmit. Commissioner, many thanks for being with us. So the latest forecasts speak about the loss of almost 12 million full-time jobs in Europe. So what can be done? What is next?
First, I think we have to keep as many people in their jobs as possible. That's what we try through the instrument of short-time work, the famous SURE instrument, which I hope can be adopted very, very soon. Second, we have to prepare the recovery. We have to be very bold to restart our economy as soon as possible, and by watching certainly the health constraints, which are still very, very tight. But this is something which member states have started now cautiously and progressively in order to limit the impact on employment. This is something which has to be done now, immediately, and which has to last for some time.
Some of the hardest hit countries, such as Italy or Spain, already have weak economies, and their economies rely on struggling sectors such as tourism. What can be done to help them?
Countries have been hit not absolutely in an equal way, and sectors have not been hit in an equal way. And when you look at some countries where tourism represents more than 10%, sometimes 20%, like in Greece, approximately 20% of GDP, that will be a real blow. So first, helping these countries to maintain as many companies also in the tourism, in the tourist business or in the tourism-related business alive. And this means that we have in Europe to have a level of solidarity.
There is a huge part of the European population working in the so-called black economy. There are people who lost jobs and they cannot legally claim for unemployment benefits. How can these people be protected? Are you considering of including them in your new instruments?
When I launched a few weeks ago the initiative to tackle undeclared work, it was before the virus came, I insisted on the fact that this is not something which should happen in Europe anymore. But I'm realistic. Unfortunately, in some member states, this undeclared economy is still very high and still very broad. Giving these people the possibility to have an income is absolutely indispensable, and then try to bring them into normal declared jobs and continuing fighting undeclared work, because it's bad for the people, it's bad for the economy, it's bad for public finance, it's bad for our social security systems.
So, Commissioner, many thanks for being with us.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks for watching and see you soon on Euronews.